Introduction. It was the summer of 2015, and I had finally made the decision. I was going to take this writing thing seriously. For years I had been writing in fits and starts. I had even self-published a couple of non-fiction business titles. However, I really wanted to write fiction. I've always been a big reader. I grew up in a religious home where television, movies, and music were strictly controlled. Somehow, though, books fell through the cracks of the rules. I think my parents assumed reading was a good habit. How much trouble could I really get into? My mom would take me to the bookstore. She was terrified of libraries, but that's another story. And let me buy any books I wanted. I would take them home and devour them. As a child, my favorite author was Michael Crichton. I still remember reading Jurassic Park and being terrified. I had nightmares about velociraptors chasing me. But I never told my parents because I was afraid they would figure out I shouldn't be reading this stuff. I burned through all of Crichton's and Grisham's titles and read whatever else I could get my hands on. I loved escaping into these grown-up, thrilling worlds where life and death were constantly at stake. This reading habit followed me into adulthood, but along the way I had the dream of writing my own stories. I wanted to tell ones that made people feel the way I felt when I read. So I began writing. I would start working on something, get a little way in, realize it was rubbish, and stop working. A couple times I won NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writing Month, where writers from all over the world attempt to finish a 50,000-word novel during the month of November. But when I read my novel, I could see it was poorly written. However, during the summer of 2015, I decided it would be different this time. I had to start writing fiction again, and not just put words down, but figuring out how to tell a great story. As I tend to do before embarking on a new project, I started reading books. I read Save the Cat by Blake Snyder and Story by Robert McKee. I reread On Writing by Stephen King and Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. I burned through On Writing Well by William Zinsser and Struck and White's The Elements of Style. There were plenty of others, but you get the idea. These all helped. They were missing something. I knew on some level there had to be an underlying order to storytelling. I wanted to learn the structure of story. I needed to know why the stories I wrote didn't work and how to fix them. This is when I finally picked up The Story Grid by Shawn Coyne. I bought it as soon as it came out, but it went on my shelf right away. At 8.5 by 11 inches, 344 pages, and almost 2 pounds of dead trees, it was quite the intimidating read. But after reading my way through the other options and not finding what I needed, I finally gave The Story Grid a try. I wasn't far into it before bells started going off in my head. This was what I had been looking for. I read it cover to cover, understanding only portions of it. I read it again, underlining and highlighting sections. I didn't know it then, but what I was seeking was a common language that allowed me to think clearly and have intelligent conversations about story. Every time I tried to talk to other writers and editors, it was as if I was in another country that spoke an unfamiliar language and was asking for directions. I would point and gesticulate and talk much louder than necessary, and they would listen carefully before pointing and talking without either of us making any progress. Reading The Story Grid was the first time I encountered real, concrete words with clear definitions applied to this creative process of writing. Through a happy coincidence, Shawn and I met through my business. So I reached out to him to see if we could talk for a few minutes. He obliged. That phone call turned into a weekly podcast where he coached me through the art of storytelling. I have a confession. At this point in my journey, I did not understand what editors do. I thought they were people who fixed your misplaced commas and misspelled words. They might also clean up your sentence structure along the way. This, of course, is important work and has to be done, but only at the end when the story works. I knew that cleaning up my grammar wasn't enough to fix my books. After working with Shawn, I realized that editing was much more than grammatical mastery. The first thing a good editor does is provide a common language and toolbox. Why is this so important? If you ask 10 different writers to explain what the word genre means, you'll probably get 10 different answers. You will also get divergent answers in discussions about acts, sequences, scene types, characterization, and other common words and phrases. Before we can have a real discussion or even think about fixing our stories, we must understand the meaning of the words we're using. When my editor says inciting incident, it's helpful to know that what I think an inciting incident is and what she thinks an inciting incident is are the same thing. Until we have a shared language, we cannot have a real discussion about our writing. The second thing a good editor brings to the table is the ability and perspective to provide concrete feedback. If you have ever tried to get feedback on your writing from other writers, it can be maddening. Here's an example I've used before. That character isn't really believable. The dialogue is a little meh. It's too long. It's too short. You need to fix the ending. While these things may be true, they aren't clear, solvable problems. How do you fix dialogue that is meh? Imagine if you had the same conversation with a car mechanic. Me: did you look at my car? Mechanic: yeah, something is wrong with it. Me: yeah, I kind of thought that, but I wasn't sure. What's wrong with it? Mechanic: your engine isn't running right. Me: okay, what's wrong with it? Mechanic: it's running a little soft. Me: okay, what does that mean? Mechanic: it's just not working for me. Me: which part? What needs to be fixed? Mechanic: I don't know. You just need to work on it. Me falls to knees sobbing. A good editor doesn't offer fuzzy, vague feedback. They identify concrete, clear problems that are fixable. The goal of this book is to share some foundational language and tools that StoryGrid provides to help us think clearly about and discuss our stories. This will increase our ability to, number one, edit our own work. We're often told that we're too close to our own writing to edit it properly. While it's true that we need an editor toward the end of our project, once we become familiar with the StoryGrid toolbox, we can create much better stories on our own. Number two, work with our editor. With a shared language and toolbox, along with the ability to identify problems, working with our editor will become much easier and more efficient. Let's get started.